So I'm going to talk about the Enlightenment. Perfectly straightforward for a while. I mainly want to talk about the images of the Enlightenment because I think that I've increasingly think that images are more accurate than concepts. If you look at them carefully, they often, I think, are more accurate. They speak more deeply than concepts. I also have this kind of theory that, like I don't remember, partly just because I don't remember concepts very easily. I don't remember lists at all. Even now, I can't I can't tell you some of the very basic lists that all of you can know. They just don't stay with me. But the stories and the images, they've stayed with me just on one hearing. I think I can't be alone in that. I think that it's not surprising that I remember the images and the stories really vividly. I don't need to even hear that story more than once, and I know the story. I can say it again without having to look at notes and so on. I would imagine that the early disciples of the Buddha and their disciples, that's what they would have had, is a store of images, which they would unpack, not probably a set of lists that they could go through. At least, if they're like me, they wouldn't have been able to go through the list. Perhaps some would, but I certainly wouldn't. So I want to look at the images, primarily. I don't quite know what I want to say yet, we'll find out. I'll just chat and then we'll stop and have a cup of tea. So it's like a fireside chat. So the first thing that strikes me about when talking about the Enlightenment is two things, just a sort of preamble to the whole subject. That firstly, we need to remember that we don't know what we're talking about. I don't know what I'm talking about, and nor do you. Okay? So we have this word like Buddha, Enlightenment. We've no idea what they mean. Absolutely no idea. So it's really odd, if you think about it, to set off to give a talk about which none of us know anything about, including the speaker. But I do think that's very important because we so easily gloss over that, don't we? We can say things about the Buddha. We can tell you what the Buddha means. We can tell you what the word that's translated into enlightenment is. We can tell you the metaphor of that word. We can talk about the Buddha and so on, but we don't know what that means. We don't really understand what that means. So it's like a great big mystery, really, that I don't know and you don't know. So when we say Buddha and enlightened, it's just worth stepping back first and say we don't actually know at all what that means. It's a mystery to us. Because it's a mystery to us, it's worth attending to, if you see what I mean. But we don't know what it means. I've just written a book that includes talking about the Enlightenment, and I don't know what it means. And you reading it won't know what it means either. So that's the first thing to say about enlightenment. And that's strange enough, isn't it, that we don't know what it is, even though we talk about it, and even talk about it quite glibly. It's amazing that we don't know what it is, but we don't. And we don't know that we don't know often. But the second, in a way, more striking thing is that we sort of do. I'm that kind of speaker. You're not going to be able to relax in this one. We sort of do, don't we? Sort of being the important phrase. We sort of do. We don't know, but it's not true to say we absolutely don't know. Otherwise, really, we just have words. And what's amazing is that we haven't just got words. Largely, I think we have, and we need to be much more aware that we don't really know what we're talking about. What we know is words about it, which aren't the same at all. I won't go on. I have to be careful of my digressions, but mostly we've got words about it. But strangely, we sort of do know, in a way that it's very difficult to express. So even when you see a Buddha figure, it's not completely alien to you, even though it might be for some of us culturally alien. It's not completely alien. You get something even from the Rupa. But more especially, it seems to chime with something in you. When you find about the Enlightenment, the more you think about it and play with the images, you seem to sort of half recognise them, as if you dreamt of Enlightenment many lifetimes ago. It's not that you literally don't know. It's not also that you do know. There's something else, isn't there? I mean, I experience it mostly when on retreat. As Ratnagoshi said, I'm going off on a 4-month retreat, as are at least 2 other people in this room, very, very soon. And on retreat, you sometimes get into this, what is it? A sort of, it's a very human life, but you feel a very simple life on retreat, a very human life. You've all been on retreat, I'm sure. If you haven't, get on one. Get your skates on. On retreat, you get this sort of very simple life, very human life. But that simple human life feels like it's going somewhere, and that it going somewhere has, as it were, an end point. You feel a definite momentum. Those of you whose meditations have gone deeply will start to feel that it has a momentum. It seems to be going somewhere. Some of my aesthetic experiences, I had one recently, one of the strongest aesthetic experiences I've had recently was I went to see the Meistersingers of Nuremberg, which I don't know at all. I know Wagner's operas well, apart from that one. That's one of his mature ones I don't know. And I went to see it, and the first act I thought, this is just rubbish. What are people going on? It's rubbish. And then the second act I thought, yeah, it wasn't rubbish, but it wasn't much better. In the third act I just seemed to take off. I sort of left this human world. What is one of the most ecstatic experiences, aesthetic experiences in the concert hall, the opera hall, I've ever had in my life. I won't go into it, otherwise it'd take too long, but even those kind of aesthetic experiences seem to have, as it were, a sort of momentum and a sort of directionality to them. So, in a way, I find that more surprising than the fact that we don't know. I do think we need to get better at knowing that we don't know, so that we think more. Otherwise, we just come out with the things we say about the Buddha and the Enlightenment, and it's actually rather too easy to talk about. So I do think we need to get better at not knowing, but then explore in what sense we do know. Otherwise, we literally wouldn't know which way to point, would we, if we didn't know at all. But we do have something that chimes with the Enlightenment, and it does feel like, to the degree I'm in a healthy mental state, in a good state, in relationship with other people in a good state, it does seem to have that communal aspect. It's not just to do with me. Sometimes even in a room like this tonight, if we're all focusing on it, gradually you do start to feel, as it were, the presence of enlightenment, which is not to do with me, it's not to do with you, but it's not separate from me or you either. And sometimes I get this when I teach. I do teach a lot at the centre, and I've taught, I think, pretty much every week since I got ordained 25 years ago. And what you're always looking for is a certain kind of atmosphere that arises between us, which again has this sense of, oh yes, this is what life is about, and what life is about is going somewhere. I can feel it directly. It's not an idea or an ideology or a system. You can feel it like a flowing, and you can feel it in the atmosphere when I've taught at the centre at my best. I can feel that arise, and it's only just that I have to be sitting at the front. It could have been someone else sitting in the front. You're just playing a particular part in that drama, but you can feel it arise, and well, it's a sort of knowing, but it's not. You don't know. I mean, that's what I'm always looking for, is that kind of atmosphere. But it doesn't. What's striking about it is it's different from me. It's not just to do with me talking, having interesting things to say, which one hopes one does. It's more than that. It's not just about the audience listening attentively and imaginatively. Something more is created that goes beyond me, goes beyond people sitting and listening, but is not separate to me or people listening. It's both intimate and universal. And we all taste it from time to time. Just the other day I was waiting for a tube and just looking into the dark tunnel of the tube. And just for a moment, so hang on, something's going on here. There's a dark tunnel of the tube and the sign and the yellow line on the edge of the platform. There's the posters. Nothing special, nothing out of the ordinary. But just for a moment it started to feel like there was something about it that was valuable. And I remember turning around, looking down the other end of the platform, people standing waiting for the tube. And for a moment, oh, there's more to all this. And then as soon as I think, oh, there is, it's gone. And I'm just catching the tube again, and then you think, oh, I must have just been, had a good lunch. If you're a sceptical mindset, you think, oh, I was probably making it up. But my increasing sense is that we're not making it up, and that it comes out of experience if you attend to it. Yeah? And even that little experience there seems to have, oh, there is, as it were, another world, although of course it's not literally another world, it's this world, but this world runs much deeper than I thought, which is the same as saying I run much deeper than I thought, that life runs much deeper than we thought. So those are the first two things that strike me about the Enlightenment, is that we don't know what it is, and we sort of do. And that sort of doing, that sort of the fact that we sort of do is what actually brings us all here tonight, that we sort of do. But if you said, what do you mean you sort of do, you couldn't really answer. You have to say, well, you make noises. We sort of do. I had another thought then, it's gone. So that's what I sort of, that's what immediately occurs to me when I think about the Enlightenment. So, let's go back to that story. So you've got Siddhartha, he's just been left by the 5 ascetics. And again, we call them the 5 ascetics. Really, they're just 5 friends of his. Much simpler to think of it like that, I think. He's meditating with 5 mates, 5 friends of his, who are obviously, they must have been remarkable men, particularly they were men, but it doesn't matter that they were men. They must have been remarkable, but couldn't go as far as Siddhartha. Siddhartha realizes that he then starves himself and all that sort of thing. You all know the story. Eats some milk rice, which is basically rice pudding. It doesn't sound quite the same, does it, when you say eat some rice pudding? But that's what milk rice is, isn't it? Milk, rice. Any thoughts? Rice pudding with that little skinny thing on top. Ambrosia, yeah. So he has some rice pudding. The obvious meal to have before you gain enlightenment. So warming. If you translate it into rice pudding, we're in this world of me standing by the tube. It's only it's ambrosia, like you use again. I don't know whether they still do it. It's not some sacramental meal. It's rice pudding. It's me standing in the tube, and then he walks off into the forest alone because, of course, his friends have abandoned him because they think he's gone back to his public school ways. That's my modern, anachronistic. Anyway, he didn't go to public school, don't worry. Nor did I, so we're right. So he wanders off into the forest alone and sits down to meditate, and he makes that famous vow: flesh may wither, blood may dry up, but I won't move from this spot until I gain enlightenment. Again, this is me playing with the story, but it wouldn't surprise me if that's word for word what he thought. Wouldn't surprise me. My own little guess is that there are 2 sentences from the whole Pali Canon that might be word for word. I'm not a Pali scholar. I hope none of you are either. If you are, don't come and talk to me in the tea break. You won't be welcome. I don't care how correct you are. But it's, you can imagine that a thought like that you really do. There are very occasional in our lives that we can actually remember what somebody said or what we thought. It's very rare, actually. One of the reasons why Bhante Sangha, our founder, doesn't use dialogue in his memoirs, as he said he won't do it unless he can remember word for word what was said. He won't write a kind of approximation of it. Very, very fastidious thing to do. And he said it's a weakness in the biographies that the memoirs is not dialogue. But occasionally you do remember word for word, either something you thought or something you said. So it wouldn't surprise me if Siddhartha, as he was then, remembers word for word, that's what I thought. You know, it's probably got codified, but probably it wouldn't surprise me if he remembered that and actually said, that's what I thought, I remember that. That was a key moment in my life. I think the other thing that I think could be word for word is Apamadena Sampadatur, the last words of the Buddha. People would have been waiting for his last words. They would have been expecting his last words. Even now we're interested in last words, aren't we? There's books of people's last words. Oscar Wilde's was supposed to be, it's either me or the wallpaper. One of us will have to go. Wild, like so, you know, with mindfulness strive on, as it's badly translated, it's not really mindfulness, it's something much deeper than that, he's saying. It literally would mean with something like, with the least amount of drunkenness would be with the least amount of intoxication would be better translation. Strive on. And if you imagine, people have been waiting for his last words, and people who weren't there would have asked him, wouldn't they? What did he say at the end? I think that's what the human question you'd ask. You'd say, what did he say? And the Buddha himself would have known that people would remember that. Those words would have been repeated very quickly. People would have particularly treasured them because they were the last words. So it's possible, 2,500 years later, that literally is what the Buddha said, lying under the tweed sal trees. So all that time ago. Anyway, back to the Enlightenment. He walks out into the forest, as we know, and then starts doing the mindfulness of breathing. Simple enough practice. You've all done it. Your ordinary breath, your ordinary body sits down to do the mindfulness of breathing. But sits down to do it with this incredible determination. And then, you know, very quickly becomes concentrated. Concentration goes to ecstasy. Ecstasy goes to bliss. Bliss goes to equanimity. Completely one-pointed concentration. We all know the list. Well, you might, but I probably forgot. It's vaguely like that. It's kind of good, and then it gets better. It's the basic thrust. But it's striking that you've got, you know, this incredible vow, and then you've got this immediate application of that not into a willed, right, and here we go, not into bliss, into one-pointedness, into something incredibly human. You haven't got some kind of, right, then I'm going to think my way through to the nature of reality, which is just crude and thuggish. You've got this, you know, full-bodied, deep experience of awareness. So what that's saying there is that Siddhartha, at that moment, had an incredibly fit mind. This is a concept I've been using in the new book that I got from Subhuti. Like I've got most things. You've got most of his things from Bhante. You've got most of his things from the Buddha. Yeah, he's got a fit mind. Many of us would like to make vows like that we won't get up till we get enlightenment, but we wouldn't be able to manage it. We can't make that vow. We could say the words in our head, but we can't make it. And because we're not fit enough to make it. So what you've got there is a man, you know, with a fit mind. Just as you can have a fit body, he's got a fit mind. He's got a mind of an athlete, of a great athlete. Analogously, he's got a fit mind. And mostly what we need to do in our human life, spiritual life, I suppose. I don't like spiritual, but in this life of ours, is to cultivate a fit mind. Without which you can't do anything. Without which you're a mess. Frankly, I mean that's what I really needed to develop when I came along to the centre. I put that in the past tense to make you feel that I don't need to develop it now. That's not strictly true. Anyway, but that's our task, isn't it, to develop a fit mind? And that's what you see in Siddhartha, is somebody with an incredibly fit mind. So he can make that vow, and it's not some weird split-off idea. It's not some sort of ideology. He can make it, and then he can follow it up. And he can follow it up because his experience opens up into bliss and happiness and humanity, not into sort of mental force, which is really just a split-off intellect. Okay, then what happens next? So there he is sitting there, and then you get the famous, what happens first? Let's say the famous attack of Mara. You all know the story of the demons all coming to try and drag Mara away from his seat, throwing lightning bolts and spears and rammers and sometimes, discussed in the text very beautifully. Partly, I think it's a part that we can relate to. So the demons get a big part in the story, and then of course the rain of weapons turns into flowers and drops at the Buddha's feet, which again, the imagery there is so intelligent, so accurate, that all these all these forces of aversion, of hatred, of malice, of cruelty, but also of coarseness. The demons are coarse. They're thuggish. They're coarse, stupid, brutish. Yeah. All of those forces being transformed, effectively weapons from those forces, all being transformed to flowers that fall at the Buddha's feet. I think there's something extraordinarily deep about that. It's a transformation, isn't it? It's not a pushing them away, but it's not a acceptance of them either. Weapons become flowers. I know it's so easily sentimentalized and rather cliched, but that doesn't mean to say it's not profound. I think it's hugely profound. It's what we're trying to do in every meditation. It's what we're trying to do in every communication where we're in trouble with someone. Can we transform aversion, hatred, malice, spite, which we have much more of than we like to admit? Can we transform it into flowers? Can we transform it into flowers in an extremis, when we're in pain, when we're really not getting what we want, when we're disappointed? Can we transform it into flowers? But what strikes me again with the image is that, well, it's exquisitely beautiful, isn't it? That they drop at the Buddha's feet, so they become a decoration. What was thuggishness and violence actually ends up being a kind of decoration, just to beautify the spot. And of course, it makes me think that there's a mirror here with the parinirvana experience, because the parinirvana lies under the twin sal trees, and suddenly there's a rain of flowers. So that, I'm very struck by that, because you've got thuggishness, you've got violence being transformed into flowers and beautifying the Buddha. You never know when he becomes a Buddha. My impulse is that all of these images actually all happen in the same moment. That we talk about them sequentially, and then some people latch on to Pratisha Samappada, which is a sort of worked out vision of what reality is as being the Enlightenment. I personally think it's not like that. Well, how would I know? Anyway, you don't know either, so you're fine. So you can think what you like, and I can think what I don't know. I think the whole thing is trying to picture the Enlightenment as if they're all facets that if you look into deep enough, eventually you could touch Enlightenment. But no way in is enough, So these flowers, you see, then I was thinking of the Parinirvana. It's very striking. I've always found it terribly moving in the Parinirvana Sutra. And again, utterly right. I don't mean necessarily literally true. I don't know. One shouldn't rule that out. You just don't know. But I don't know whether it's literally true. But poetically, it's absolutely right that he lies under these twin sal trees, which come into untimely blossom, as it said, and rain petals down on the Buddha. But the interesting the transformation that's gone on in the image Because, of course, in the parinirvana, there's nothing to transform. There's no Mara to transform. And yet there's still a rain of flowers. But there's nothing violent to transform. It's almost, but you see how that becomes a deeper image, that the universe has to rain flowers on the Buddha. That's all it's got. All it's got is to beautify the centre of the world, sort of thing. But you haven't got anything, it's not transformed anymore. Anyway, so I think it's interesting to sort of put those images next to each other. Then you've got the, Mara, the sort of lord of the demonic army. Mara, the word Mara means literally death. So he represents all those forces, as we know, of limitation, of narrowness, of worldliness. He's a sort of guardian of the ordinary. He's a guardian of the conventional. He tries to stop you. Anytime you go beyond your habitual everyday consciousness, he finds clever way of stopping you. He guards the gates to convention. He's the sort of king of convention. So, he's deeply threatened by the fact that this guy's about to become a Buddha. So he then sends his daughters, or sons, depending which way you're inclined. You can change all the genders, depending on your own personal experience. And the daughters try and seduce him away from the Bodhi tree. And of course we know that he doesn't do anything, just sits there. Beautiful, incredibly accurate way of saying all hatred is transformed into not just nullified, it's not like he just takes the poison out of it. They're actually transformed into adornments, into flowers, into something alive and beautiful. All greed, all lust. Sometimes greed in Buddhism is actually just the word translated is into lust, lust for things. All of that, you just don't. You're so, the Buddha is so happy and so human that it just doesn't touch him. It's not because no thanks, too religious. Keep off, girls. It's not that. It's just that there's nothing missing in him. There's nothing lacking. So there's nothing he can give them. You have a little tiny touch of that when you're a child sometimes, where the idea of sex, it just seems embarrassing. You see your parents kissing, you thought, oh my God, it's so embarrassing. What a weird thing to do, press your mouth to each other, it's disgusting. Anyway, when you're a child, you sometimes have a touch of, well, there's nothing to add to this life. Yeah. So you have that experience, and then you have, of course, Mara saying, well, who are you to gain enlightenment? So it's the great doubt. And it's interesting, again, as after the disappearance of hatred and greed, you still got doubt. And in the 5 hindrances, doubt is supposed to be underlying them all. If they have a hierarchy, which I think hierarchies are all a bit problematic, but let's say they do. If they do, doubt is the underlying form. So it's interesting, in the images, you get all of hatred transformed, all of lust, not so much transformed, it's just that there's no need for it. You just don't need anything. It doesn't add anything, it would actually take away. And then you get doubt. You get this voice, Mara just becomes the voice of doubt. Which is interesting, isn't it? Because I'm talking to some of my friends who are going on the Gukyoka course to be ordained. We had this going forth ceremony on the weekend we've just done. And it provokes this sense in some of my friends I've been talking to that, but hang on, I'm just like this ordinary guy, I can't be doing this thing, I felt the same when I became a public preceptor. I felt like I'd been miscast. I felt like I'm like a romantic comedy actor. And they put me in a thriller. Sometimes it works. Sometimes you think, I don't really think you could pull that off. I felt like horribly miscast. It provokes that sort of sense of, no, there's been a mistake. That sense of doubt. Yeah. So it's interesting that that seems to, if one takes some images, go all the way up to enlightenment. Quite what it means at that point, I don't know. It can't mean what we think it means. It's not a psychological doubt. I don't know, because I don't know what the enlightenment is, but it means something. And then the Buddha famously, as you all know, touches the earth. It's supposed to be like in one text, it's like a lightning bolt. Just touches the earth gently with the tip of his fingers. And then the earth goddess arises out of the earth and says, no, I've seen Siddhartha practicing from countless lifetimes. I've seen him practice. Basically, she says, no, he's got a fit mind. I've seen him be patient, courageous, humble, brave, kind, truthful, radical, agile. I've seen him think deeply. I've seen him feel strongly. I've seen him. He's the thing. He's the man. Yeah. That's what she doesn't say it like that. But that's what she's basically saying. And interestingly, she comes out of the earth up to her waist, as the earth goddess always does. In Norse legends, which I know, is it Norse in the ring cycle that he takes from? Wagner has Erda, the earth goddess, and she appears similarly from, just comes up to, she appears up to the waist, because the rest of her is the earth. Yeah? Again, I find this image exquisite, and again, not only beautiful, but absolutely right. So you could imagine if you were making it up, you'd say, okay, person says he's your Tao, you touch the earth, yeah, I like that, it's nice to have a bit of action, and then you say something. You'd say, well, actually, no, I've da-da-da. But there's something exquisitely courteous about a goddess appearing, and it would have to be female, a goddess appearing and saying, no, I've witnessed it. You see what I mean? You can't say, no, I'm the man. Because I remember being like really nice to that guy and he was really annoying. You can't do that. As soon as you do that, you're not. As soon as you state your virtues, you've no longer got them. As soon as you make claims for yourself, you should blow a raspberry at someone. I mean, not. Well, yeah, why not? Yeah. As soon as you say, I am a something, then you're not. So it's very striking that the earth goddess arises and she says, I've seen it. I've watched it all this time. There's nothing you can do. This is the case. This must happen. And for me, when are I supposed to be finished?
You got another 25 minutes, something like that.
I haven't gone that long. When people start to nod off. But she, as I say, I find this image very, very beautiful. And again, beautiful and accurate. So I think what it's saying is enlightenment is natural. That she arises to say, in this, I couldn't think of a better way of doing it. People want to make these into little sort of ancient Indian fairy stories. They're so silly. They're much more intelligent than we are. Don't get them wrong. So she's saying, if a seed of an apple tree falls into the ground, and if it's watered and rained, and if sun enough shines, a tree will grow and an apple will ripen, and then an apple will fall. Her responsibility is just to say, well, that's just what happens. I'm not doing it. They're not doing it. That's just what happens. So she's saying, I've seen waves turn. I've seen swallows fly to South Africa. I've seen king penguins walk round in a circle with eggs on their feet. You know how they do? I mean, I haven't seen them, but I saw the film. It's very good, actually. I was distracting myself. She says, I've seen all this, and I've seen it take place through the laws of nature, and now I see a Buddha arise. I've seen apples ripen, and now I see the Buddha arise. And that the Buddha arises just as an apple arises, as part of nature. It's not supernatural. It's not from outside. It doesn't require any divine intervention. It needs all the right conditions all the time. An apple tree needs all the right conditions, at least enough of the time for an apple to be born. And Siddhartha needed all the right conditions enough of the time for a Buddha to be born. But if the right conditions are there enough of the time, just as apples grow from trees, Buddhas grow from human beings. That's what the image tells us. You see what I mean? And tells us with great accuracy and beauty and courtesy. Very, very striking, isn't it, really? Very, very striking. And then, I don't think I have anything else to say about that. I mean, I could then go off into the niyamas. So do read, I think these 7 papers that Subhuti and Bhante have been writing are extremely important, but the one that he then talks about the niyamas as being different structurings of reality is in revering and relying upon the Dharma. But basically he's saying that there are laws in the universe. Bhante, the Dharma, is saying that there are laws in the universe which mean that swallows fly to South Africa, and at a deeper or higher level, whichever metaphor you prefer, mean that Buddhas arrive. It's there. And you see, that's why we sort of know it. It's for me. That's why we sort of know it. That you're here, that I'm here. I mean, I don't know why I'm just like this lad from Henley Arden, this small place. Sometimes I think that I don't have a spiritual bone in my body. I mean, I think sometimes my ankle's quite good, but sometimes I just don't have a spiritual. So I'm not a spiritual person. I don't like spiritual people. They're always so earnest, and it's really terrible sometimes. But yet, something in me recognises it. Something in me. I've never been able to not do it. Particularly since meeting sort of Bhante's teaching. So that's why we sort of know it. Is because it's we know apples. We know that this is possible. So then, what happens according to the stories? And as you can tell, I love the stories. I think the stories say so much. Then what happens? It starts to rain. Quite right. It has to rain then. Don't know why, but it sort of has to rain, doesn't it? Rain. I mean, the amount of poems that are written about rain, or the sound of rain, raining. Rain is like a key mode, isn't it, in our lives? It's supposed to be like the sound that you hear in the womb, apparently, but I think that's slightly reductive. Something about rain. Triratna Gosha comes from an island, so we live in Hill of Hope. A lot of rain. Well, you can get tired of it, can't you? Anyway, it rains. It's so beautiful that it had to rain. Pours with rain, which is like the universe saying yes. It's even now supposed to be auspicious if it rains after a ceremony. I remember once I was supporting the Agukiloga course, and out of a blue sky, straight after the ordination, it poured with rain. And you just wanted to dance in the rain. You somehow think, yes, that's exactly right. So it pours with rain, and then this great big king cobra slithers out of the undergrowth, and it's imagined as a cobra, but like a dragon-sized cobra, like a really frightening one. A huge king cobra slithers out of the undergrowth, winds itself around the Buddha, sometimes a certain set number of times, 8 times, opens his hood above the Buddha's head to protect the Buddha from the downpour. You can sometimes see Buddha figures with this king cobra wound around him. So he just carries on meditating. The rain, he's protected from the rain. When the rain stops, the king cobra unwinds itself from the Buddha's body, is transformed into a young prince, who then bows to the Buddha and disappears. This is also sort of, you get this sort of myth in, a lot of these stories are sort of reflected in some in sort of pre-Hindu Vedic sources and so on. But I just like the stories. I don't care really very much where they come from. Again, it just seems so right that you got the rain. Water very often is a symbol for the unconscious, for the powers of the unconscious. That you've got, it's an image for consciousness and unconsciousness being unified. And then, of course, again, what you've got here is an image of absolutely liberated energy, haven't you? What you've got is you've got a venomous snake, the most dangerous snake. And snakes, if you see a big snake, if one is privileged enough to see one, I don't know, you can see why Christianity wanted to make them evil. But it's quite wrong. When you see a big snake, there's this strange frisson, isn't there? You sort of recognise it. They seem to know you. The way they move is so alien to us, and yet so hypnotic. If you're not careful, if you're in a good state, you'll actually go towards it. I remember that I was on a solitary, and there was a snake in the path, and I was just fascinated by it and went towards it, and then I thought, oh, okay, friend. There's something kind of fascinating about snakes. They're beautiful and, as it were, deadly, and they seem to be moving in such a different way, and yet you feel a relationship to them. So it's right. It's a snake. So that otherness that we associate with the snake, that interestingly in the West we've demonized, which is really just an image but a reality of our deep energy, our primal energy, becomes something that protects the Buddha from downpour, becomes something that's not tamed, because you can't tame that, but something that's part of the experience. It's released. The cobra is released. Incredible thing, isn't it? And then he turns into this young prince, bows and disappears, presumably somehow saying that those forces are completely integrated into Buddha. He can just be a young prince and bows to the Buddha. I really like that story. So those are most of the stories that we know, don't we? And then I like to then imagine the Buddha carries on sitting, and he has the experience that we want to call the Enlightenment experience, but I don't particularly want to talk about that aspect so much. I think all of those are talking with great accuracy and beauty about trying to give you a feel for it. So then he's sitting. I want to still think that we're still describing the Enlightenment, not post-Enlightenment. I want him still sitting, and then in that incredible, unimaginable silence. So remember, one of the epithets for the Buddha is nisprapuncture, no propunction, which means no ruminating, problem-solving, chattering mind. The Buddha can think, and can think incredibly deeply, but if he doesn't want to think or need to think, he doesn't think at all. There's just this incredible silence, which for us would be such relief. But it's that, again, you see how we do know it, because probably that's one of the reasons you came, because you yearn for that silence. I yearn for that silence. I remember as a young man thinking, God, the noise in my head, I yearned for that, for nisprapuncture, for that silence. I didn't realise I was yearning for him. So you have to imagine this incredible silence that we can't imagine, that is not a silence of vacuity, a deeper. You get the tiniest taste of it at the end of a wonderful concert or a wonderful play, where you just want to sit and just soak up the reverberations of what you felt. In that silence, a glimmer of a thought appears, and it's written in the text, but I think it's much more like the tiniest fin appearing out of the water of science, of a glimmer of thought, which has to be then set out in words, but probably all happened in one moment, one non-moment, where I don't know that I can teach this. I don't know that I can't teach this. That this isn't. No, it can't be like that. You can't. No, I haven't thought about it. That, every way we think about it is too crude. Some kind of glimmer of I don't know. Perhaps even probably not even as thought as words. And then from that glimmer of a thought, you get the appearance of Brahma Sahampati, who's a god who appears in a ray of light and begs the Buddha to teach the Dhamma. He knows there's been doubt in the Buddha's mind. According to the sutras, the Buddha thinks, I'm not sure I can teach it, and actually I think it's going to be unpleasant to teach it, because people are just not going to get it, and it would be better to just sit here. I don't think quite that captures the spirit of it, but it's some kind of doubting that A, you can do it, and B, that people can hear it. Brahma Sahampati famously appears, says, please teach the Dhamma for the welfare of the world. The Buddha then has the vision of the lake of lotuses, of red, blue and white lotuses, extending for infinity, at different levels of evolution. Some of the lotuses are buds, some of them are opening in the water, and so on. So I think that's, again, I imagine that happening in a moment. And I think it's, again, both beautiful and, like anything that's truly beautiful, completely accurate. Anything that's truly beautiful is just as philosophical as philosophy, just as rigorous, but it's done in images. It's not fluff. So what it's saying is that somehow there's this, doubt. And what happens with that doubt, because we could say, okay, after his enlightenment, he thought about, could he teach this? Thought, God, it's going to be pretty tricky, but I doubt people will get it. But then thinking about it, I think some people might. That wouldn't be closer to reality, it would be further away. What you've got is a drama, a mystical drama, a doubt, a vision of a God saying, please teach, and from that, another vision of humanity at different stages of evolution. Again, coming back to we sort of know it, because we are lotuses. The Buddha didn't see lotuses and slugs and gnats and the odd water boatman. He saw lotuses. So the Buddhahood is saying that it's like for like. It's not difference in kind. It's like for like. There's hierarchy. Some are little buds under the water. The Buddha is really the only fully opened lotus. But they're all lotuses. I mean, the more you explore just that metaphor, I won't go into it all. It's very, very accurate, incredibly accurate. Much better than any exposition on it. So he has this vision, and do you see how accurate that is? So otherwise he'd have to decide to teach. He'd have to think, okay, I'm going to teach this. And then you're in the problem of self-will, and he's gone beyond self-will. The Buddha can't want to do anything. There's no question of the Buddha wanting to teach. There's no question of the Buddha not wanting to teach. So what you've got is the universe itself begging him to teach. And out of that begging, he sees a vision of humanity in different stages of evolution. So it's analogous to asking a parent, do you want to help your child when they're suffering? Your young child. It's irrelevant. If you see your 8-year-old, 7-year-old suffering, your whole mind and body and heart moves without having to think about it. That's what this story represents. Do you see what I mean? That you see there's a completely objective need. There's no question of you wanting to do it or not. That's irrelevant. Do you see what I mean? Very, very important story. And you could say much more about it, but and I still think that that's enlightenment. I think that vision is part of the enlightenment experience. It tends to be, this is what happened after it. I think that's literal to think of it like that. I think they're all parts of the enlightenment. I even want to think that his first the time when Kandanya knows, is the final moment of enlightenment, when it's shared. Because It's only when you share something that it becomes fully real. That's true at every level for us. It's only when I share this with you that I know it, to the degree I know it, which isn't much. It's only when you share something that it becomes real. If it's true for us, I bet you it's true at that level. So I want to think of the Enlightenment, as it were, finishes there, if it finishes at all, which it probably doesn't. So what you've got then is all these different facets of enlightenment. And you could call this simply, this is where spiritual death becomes spiritual rebirth. Spiritual death being the seeing through of self, spiritual rebirth being the arising of compassion. But even that I think is a bit reductive. I prefer it just to all be part of the one experience. So Brahma's Humpty appears, begs him to teach. He sees the lotus vision. One or two more before we finish. Then, of course, so he knows he's going to teach. So he thinks, and what does he do? So he thinks, who can I teach it to? And he immediately thinks of his teachers, which I think is very striking. And apparently, according to textual research, this is unusual. Traditionally, what you did is you stayed put and people came to you. You just, like the Buddha boy recently, I don't know anything about him, but people you just go to them. It's quite untraditional to think of, I'm going to go somewhere. You just sit there and people will gather around you and marvel at you. Anyway, he thinks of his teachers. Isn't that right? You think of people who've given to you. He thinks, they gave me so much. I know them really well. I think they could get it. Of course, that's crude to explicate it like that, but that's what's going on, isn't it? I know them well enough to know they could get this, and I'm really grateful to them. They've given me something. They're part of what's got me here. I want to go to them. Seems to know immediately that they're dead. Then he thinks of his 5 friends who left him in disgust. And he seems to know where they are. I don't see any reason why he wouldn't know where they are. I don't find that fantastical. I don't find it fantastical that he knows they're dead either. I think when we start to find those sort of things fantastical, we're taking consciousness literally. Because we don't know what consciousness is. Anyway, so he knows that he knows where they are, and he decides to go and teach them. And the last moment of the story I want to leave us with, which isn't, there's no reference for this in the sources, but I think it must be an incredible moment. Of course, then the Buddha opens his eyes. After all that, having entered the forest as an ordinary person, an extraordinary person, but just like that, having gone through, having discovered just how deep our humanity runs, and not only having discovered it, but become one with it, become the depth that humanity runs. Unimaginable transformation. Bhante says that the Buddha is basically a whole new species unto himself. Having become this new being in the world, he opens his eyes and looks at what? Trees, kusa grass, the sound of the Naranjana river running nearby, dust just past, sounds of monkeys, insects. But that world being seen for the first time with the eyes of a Buddha. I mean, what got me into this, going back to Wagner, is in the Ring Cycle, which is a wonderful tetralogy of operas, Brunhilde is a goddess. She's put to sleep on a rock for, I can't remember how long time. She's a goddess, so it doesn't really matter. There's a moment when she opens her eyes. And Wagner's music, and Wagner puts in the score, she opens her eyes. Here's the music for her opening her eyes. And if the production's any good, which is they're often rubbish, if you can get it, this music, and she opening her eyes, like a god opening her eyes, and she sings how beautiful the sun is, and immediately sings up to the sun. that there's just this paean of beauty and bliss, that the world has become, is seen through the eyes of the goddess, is beauty. How much more so must that be the case with the Buddha? It's interesting, it's not come down to it, there's no mention of it in the text, but it seems to me a key moment, just as it is on our own tiny little level when our own meditation's gone deeper and we open our eyes and we walk out to the puddles and the rain and the street lights just around here. Do you know how it's more, suddenly more, and that as you leave the centre you feel yourself to be moving in the world with a new ease, that you'd been polarised with it, you'd been against it almost, and you'd thought it was a threat. And after even a slightly deeper meditation, it starts to feel like there's more, and that you run more smoothly with it, in it. It seems to be more magical. Yeah. So that moment of the Buddha opening his eyes, the first time the Buddha opened his eyes, seems to me a moment I'd like us to, I know, we want to create our own stories of stories of stories of stories of stories. I'd like to add that to our story. Yeah. So that's a good place.